For 3,000 years, humanity borrowed time, resources, and mercy from a galaxy that saw them as nothing more than useful pets. The Galactic Council kept meticulous records of every favor, every rescue, every act of charitable intervention in human affairs. They never expected payment. They certainly never expected humanity to remember every single debt, with interest. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the towering crystalline spires of the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime, her human form dwarfed by the magnificent architecture that had been designed to intimidate lesser species. The morning light of three suns cast rainbow patterns through the crystal walls, creating an atmosphere of otherworldly beauty that never failed to remind visitors of their place in the cosmic hierarchy. Sarah adjusted her simple diplomatic robes, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the other species' representatives. Humans had learned long ago that appearing humble and grateful served them well in galactic politics. The Council preferred their client species to know their place. The daily tribute meeting will commence, announced Archon Vexthera, her serpentine form coiled elegantly around the central podium. The Zephyrian scale shimmed with authority as she addressed the assembled representatives. Terra Designation Human Colony Network, step forward. Sarah moved to the speaking circle, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Around her, representatives from dozens of species watched with expressions ranging from bored indifference to mild amusement. Humanity's daily tribute presentations had become something of a routine entertainment for the more established species. Honored Council, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic design. The Human Colony Network respectfully presents this cycle's contribution to galactic stability and prosperity. She activated a holographic display that showed shipping manifests, mining quotas, and population statistics. The numbers were impressive by human standards, but Sarah knew they barely registered as significant to species that controlled entire star clusters. Agricultural output has increased by 12%, Sarah continued. Our mining colonies in the Kepler sectors have exceeded projected yields by 8%. Human exploratory teams have successfully charted 17 new systems, 3 of which contain resources suitable for Council exploitation. Archon Vexthera's head tilted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as mild approval. Acceptable performance, young species. Your contributions to the greater galactic good are noted and appreciated. The condescension in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah had heard it thousands of times over her tenure as Earth's primary ambassador. It was the tone one might use when praising a particularly clever pet for learning a new trick. However, Vexthera continued, we have received reports of concerning activities in human space. Several of your exploration teams have been detected in regions marked as restricted by ancient treaties. Explain this transgression. Sarah's expression remained perfectly neutral, though her pulse quickened. Honored Archon, our teams follow all established protocols. If there have been navigational errors, we sincerely apologize and will implement additional training measures. See that you do. Vexthera's tongue flicked out, tasting the air in a gesture that Sarah knew indicated irritation. The Council's patience with human expansion is not unlimited. Remember that your species exists at our sufferance. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled representatives. The Thraxian delegate, a massive insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles in what Sarah recognized as laughter. Perhaps, the Thraxian rumbled, it is time to remind the humans of their debt to galactic civilization. 3,000 years ago, when their primitive ships first stumbled into civilized space, who provided them with faster-than-light technology? Who prevented their extinction during the plague years? Who mediates their territorial disputes and prevents them from destroying themselves? Sarah felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. The debt. Always, it came back to the debt. Humanity owed everything to the Galactic Council, and the Council never let them forget it. Council member Zaktoth speaks wisdom, Vexthera agreed. Perhaps a reminder is indeed in order. Ambassador Chen, prepare a comprehensive report on human gratitude initiatives. The Council wishes to ensure your species properly appreciates the magnitude of our generosity. Of course, Honored Archon, Sarah replied, bowing her head in the prescribed manner. Humanity is eternally grateful for the Council's benevolent guidance. The session continued for another hour, with various species presenting their contributions and receiving their assignments. Sarah remained standing in the prescribed position of respect, listening to discussions of resource allocation, territorial adjustments, and the countless administrative details that kept the galaxy running smoothly under Council oversight. As the meeting concluded and the representatives began to disperse, Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave. The day's humiliations were standard fare, nothing unexpected or particularly degrading by galactic standards. She had long ago learned to compartmentalize the emotional cost of these interactions. Ambassador Chen. Sarah turned to find Consul Mirthak approaching, the elderly Eltarian cybernetic implants glinting in the crystal light. Mirthak had served on the council for over 4 centuries and was one of the few beings who occasionally showed something approaching genuine courtesy to human representatives. Consul, Sarah acknowledged with a respectful nod. Walk with me, Mirthak said, his voice pitched low enough that the words wouldn't carry to other departing delegates. I wish to speak with you privately. They moved together through one of the chamber's side corridors, away from the main flow of traffic. The walls here were lined with historical displays showing the formation of the Galactic Council and the integration of various species into civilized space. Humanity's section was brief and largely focused on their rescue from barbarism. I have been monitoring the reports from your restricted space incursions, Mirthak said without preamble. The official explanation of navigational errors is insufficient. Sarah kept her expression carefully neutral. I'm not sure I understand your concern, Consul. Mirthak stopped walking and turned to face her fully. His ancient eyes, enhanced with sophisticated targeting systems, studied her with uncomfortable intensity. In my 4 centuries of service, I have observed many species attempt to push boundaries. Usually, such behavior stems from ignorance, desperation, or foolish ambition. Human incursions follow none of these patterns. Our exploration teams are simply being thorough in their survey work, Sarah replied. If there have been technical violations of restricted zones, we will certainly review our protocols. Technical violations. Mirthak repeated the phrase with what might have been amusement. Ambassador, I have access to sensor records from your accidental incursions. Your ships carry survey equipment far more sophisticated than anything the Council has provided to human space. Your scanning patterns suggest intimate knowledge of what you expect to find. These are not the actions of lost explorers. Sarah's mind raced, but her training kept her expression steady. I'm not sure what you're implying, Consul. Mirthak studied her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Of course you're not. However, I would suggest caution. There are members of the Council who view human expansion with considerable suspicion. If your activities were to be perceived as ungrateful, the consequences could be severe. Humanity has no desire to appear ungrateful, Sarah said carefully. We are well aware of our debt to galactic civilization. Are you? Mirthak asked. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know of the Debt Codex? The question caught Sarah off guard. The Debt Codex was an ancient document that supposedly contained the complete record of humanity's obligations to the galactic community. References to it appeared in official documentation, but Sarah had never seen the actual text. I'm familiar with the concept, Consul, but I haven't had access to the complete document. Mirthak's expression shifted subtly. Interesting. The Codex contains detailed records of every intervention, every assistance, every act of Council generosity toward your species over the past 3 millennia. It is quite comprehensive. Perhaps you should request access to review it. There was something in his tone that suggested more than casual interest in historical documentation. Sarah filed the conversation away for later analysis. I will certainly make that request, Consul. Thank you for the suggestion. Mirthak nodded and began walking again. The galaxy is vast, Ambassador, and memory is often selective. But some debts run deeper than others, and some creditors have longer memories than their debtors might expect. They reached the main corridor, and Mirthak melted back into the flow of departing delegates without another word. Sarah stood for a moment, processing the unusual conversation before making her way to the human diplomatic quarters. The human section of the Nexus Prime diplomatic complex was modest by galactic standards but comfortable enough. The quarters had been designed to accommodate human physiology while maintaining the aesthetic standards expected of a council facility. Sarah's office looked out over one of the station's commercial districts, where beings from hundreds of species conducted the business that kept the galaxy's economy functioning. She activated her communication array and opened a channel to Earth's diplomatic command. The quantum relay ensured near-instantaneous communication across the vast distances involved, another gift from the Council that humanity was expected to appreciate. "Control, this is Ambassador Chen with routine report transmission," she said as the connection stabilized. "Acknowledged, Ambassador," came the reply from Director Harrison back on Earth. "Proceed with briefing." Sarah provided a standard summary of the day's activities, the Council's continued emphasis on human gratitude, and the routine assignments for the coming cycle. She hesitated before mentioning her conversation with Consul Mirthak, then decided it warranted inclusion. "One additional item," she said. "I had an unusual conversation with Consul Mirthak regarding something called the Debt Codex. He suggested I should request access to review it. I'm not familiar with this document beyond basic references." There was a longer pause than usual before Director Harrison responded. "The Debt Codex is classified material, Ambassador. Request denied. Focus on your assigned duties and avoid unofficial conversations with Council members about historical documentation." The sharp tone was unlike Harrison's usual professional demeanor. Sarah frowned but acknowledged the order. After ending the transmission, she sat back in her chair and stared out at the bustling commercial district below. Something was happening. The restricted zone incursions, Mirthak's cryptic warnings, and now the director's obvious discomfort with questions about the Debt Codex. The pieces didn't form a clear picture, but Sarah had spent enough time in galactic politics to recognize the shape of hidden agendas. She activated her personal terminal and began composing a routine request for historical documentation access. If the Council wanted humanity to properly appreciate their debt, surely reviewing the complete record would be appropriate. If the request was denied, that would tell her something too. As she worked, Sarah's mind drifted to the Thraxian delegate's earlier comments about humanity owing everything to galactic civilization. The debt narrative was so deeply embedded in human culture that few ever questioned it. Children grew up learning about the Council's generosity, the technological gifts that had lifted humanity from barbarism, the protection that kept them safe in a dangerous galaxy. But Mirthak's words echoed in her mind: some creditors have longer memories than their debtors might expect. What if the debt narrative was more complex than humanity had been led to believe? What if the Council's version of events wasn't the complete story? Sarah finished her documentation request and submitted it through official channels. Then, she opened a second terminal and began accessing the human cultural archives. If there were gaps in the official history, perhaps older records might contain missing pieces. The search would have to be careful and discreet. Too much curiosity about historical matters might be viewed as ungrateful questioning of Council generosity. But Sarah had a feeling that understanding the true nature of humanity's debt might be more important than anyone realized. As she began her research, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in the galaxy's power structure. The question was whether humanity would be prepared for whatever was coming. Outside her office window, the lights of Nexus Prime continued their eternal dance of commerce and diplomacy, the same as they had for millennia. But, beneath the surface of galactic stability, Sarah sensed the first stirrings of something that might change everything. The debt was about to come due, one way or another. 3 weeks after her conversation with Consul Mirthak, Sarah Chen received approval for limited access to the Debt Codex. The authorization came with strict viewing restrictions and a Council observer present at all times, but it was more than she had expected to receive. The viewing took place in a restricted section of the Nexus Prime archives, deep within the station's core structure. Archivist Prime Kelthera, a being whose species Sarah couldn't identify, gestured to a reading station equipped with quantum security locks and biometric scanners. "The codex may only be viewed in this facility," Kelthera explained, her voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords. "No recordings, no data extraction, no notation beyond what is permitted by Council oversight. You have 2 hours." Sarah nodded her understanding and took her place at the reading station. The moment her biometric scan completed, the Debt Codex materialized in the holographic display before her. The document was massive, containing thousands of entries spanning 3 millennia of human galactic interaction. She began with the earliest entries, expecting to find records of humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. What she discovered instead made her blood run cold. The first entry was dated 2,847 years ago and detailed something called the Human Pacification Protocol. According to the record, humanity had not stumbled into galactic space as primitive explorers. They had been a rapidly expanding military power that had conquered 16 star systems and shown clear intentions of challenging established galactic order. The entry described humanity's aggressive technological development and concerning military capabilities that had prompted the Council to implement immediate containment measures. What followed was not a rescue but a systematic campaign to cripple human civilization.
Sarah's hands trembled as she continued reading.
The gifts of faster-than-light technology had come with hidden restrictions. The drives provided to humanity were deliberately limited, ensuring they could never match the speeds achieved by Council species. The plague years hadn't been a natural disaster requiring Council intervention, they had been a biological weapon designed to reduce human population to manageable levels. Every act of Council generosity had been a calculated move to keep humanity dependent and controlled. The territorial disputes that the Council mediated were conflicts they had secretly instigated. The technological assistance came with built-in limitations and hidden surveillance systems.
Fascinating reading? Kelthara inquired from her observation post.
Sarah forced her expression to remain neutral.
Very educational.
I had no idea the historical record was so comprehensive. The Council believes in thorough documentation, Kelthara replied. It prevents misunderstandings about the nature of interspecies relationships. Sarah continued reading, her mind reeling from the implications of each entry. Humanity hadn't been saved by the Council, they had been conquered and enslaved. Everything her species believed about their place in the galaxy was a carefully constructed lie. But, as she progressed through the chronological entries, Sarah began to notice something else. The tone of the records gradually shifted from confident assertions of control to increasingly concerned observations about human activities. Entry 1247, dated 800 years ago, noted unexpected human adaptation to technological limitations.
Entry 1456 described anomalous human exploration patterns suggesting hidden capabilities. Entry 1823 worried about concerning gaps in human survey reporting.
The most recent entries were the most revealing. Over the past century, the Council had documented hundreds of incidents where human behavior didn't match their psychological profiles or technological assessments. Ships appeared in systems where they should have been unable to reach. Survey reports contained data that required equipment far more advanced than anything officially provided to human space. The final entry, dated just 6 months ago, was marked with a priority classification Sarah had never seen before.
It described the discovery of what the Council termed anomalous human infrastructure in several supposedly uninhabited systems.
The language was careful and technical, but the underlying concern was clear: humanity was doing things that should have been impossible.
Time remaining, 15 minutes, Kelthara announced.
Sarah quickly scanned the remaining sections, looking for any reference to current human capabilities or Council countermeasures. What she found in the appendices made her heart race. Hidden in the technical specifications was a detailed analysis of human genetic modifications that had been implemented during the pacification protocol. The modifications hadn't just reduced human population and technological capabilities, they had included psychological conditioning designed to suppress curiosity, reduce aggression, and increase compliance with authority. The entire human species had been mentally engineered to accept their subjugation. But, the analysis noted concerning observations about genetic drift and conditioning decay over time. Recent generations of humans showed increasing resistance to the psychological modifications. The appendix recommended enhanced oversight measures and potential renewal of pacification protocols. Time expired, Kelthara announced. The holographic display vanished instantly, leaving Sarah staring at an empty projection space. Sarah sat in silence for a moment, processing what she had learned. Then, she stood, thanked the archivist, and made her way back to the human diplomatic quarters. Her mind was spinning with implications, but one thought dominated all others: someone back home needed to know what she had discovered. The return journey to her office passed in a blur of routine diplomatic interactions and polite conversations. Sarah maintained her usual professional demeanor while internally struggling with the magnitude of what she had learned. Every interaction with galactic officials now carried new weight, knowing that their courtesy masked a fundamental contempt for human autonomy.
Back in her office, Sarah faced a dilemma.
Direct communication with Earth's diplomatic command would be monitored by Council security systems.
Even coded messages would likely be detected and analyzed.
But the information she had uncovered was too important to keep to herself. She activated her personal terminal and began composing what appeared to be a routine cultural research request. Hidden within the academic language and bureaucratic formatting was a coded summary of the Det Codex contents. The message used terms and references that would be meaningless to galactic translators but would convey the essential information to anyone familiar with human historical research methodology. As she worked, Sarah noticed increased activity in the commercial district below. Ships were arriving and departing with unusual frequency, and the normal patterns of traffic seemed disrupted. She made a mental note to investigate later, then focused on completing her coded message. The transmission was acknowledged by Earth's diplomatic command within hours, faster than usual for routine cultural requests. The acknowledgement contained its own subtle codes indicating that the message had been understood and would be passed to appropriate authorities. Over the following days, Sarah noticed subtle changes in her interactions with council members. Conversations that had once been routine demonstrations of human gratitude became more pointed interrogations about human activities and intentions. The questions were still polite, but the underlying suspicion was becoming more apparent. Consul Mirthak requested another private meeting, this time in a different section of the station. They walked through the observation decks overlooking Nexus Prime's massive docking facilities, where ships from across the galaxy came to conduct business and receive assignments. "I trust your review of the historical documentation was enlightening," Mirthak said without preamble. "Very educational," Sarah replied carefully. "It provided valuable context for understanding humanity's relationship with galactic civilization." Mirthak stopped walking and turned to study her with his enhanced eyes. "And what conclusions did you draw from that context?" Sarah chose her words carefully. "I gained a deeper appreciation for the complexity of interspecies relationships over extended periods." Complexity. Mirthak repeated the word with what might have been amusement. "Yes, that is one way to describe it. Tell me, Ambassador, what do you know of the current situation in the Kepler sectors?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but Sarah's diplomatic training kept her from showing surprise. "Our mining colonies there continue to exceed production quotas. The exploration teams have identified several promising new systems for development." "Indeed they have." Mirthak's tone was neutral, but something in his posture suggested tension. "Are you aware that 3 Council survey fleets have been reassigned to the Kepler sectors over the past month?" Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. "I wasn't aware of any Council surveys in that region. Is there a concern about our operations there?" "There is concern about several matters, Ambassador. Ships have been detected in systems where no ships should exist. Sensor readings suggest technological capabilities that exceed what has been provided to human space. Most concerning of all, several Council vessels sent to investigate have simply disappeared." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain calm. "Disappeared? That's terrible. Have search and rescue operations been initiated?" "Search operations have been inconclusive." Mirthak began walking again, his pace slower and more deliberate. "The disappearances leave no debris, no distress signals, no trace evidence of what occurred. It is as if the ships simply ceased to exist." They walked in silence for several minutes while Sarah processed this information. Ships disappearing without a trace suggested technological capabilities far beyond what humanity was supposed to possess. If the Council was investigating and finding evidence of hidden human capabilities, the situation was becoming dangerous very quickly. "Consul," Sarah said finally, "if there are concerns about human activities, perhaps we should arrange for direct communication between our governments to address any misunderstandings." Mirthak stopped walking again and fixed her with an intense stare. "Ambassador, in my centuries of service, I have observed the rise and fall of many species. I have seen civilizations challenge the Council's authority, and I have witnessed the consequences of such challenges. Without exception, species that attempt to exceed their designated limitations are brought back into compliance." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah nodded slowly, acknowledging that she understood the implications. "However," Mirthak continued, "I have also observed that the galaxy is vast and memory is indeed selective. Sometimes, events occur that challenge our understanding of what should be possible. When such events happen, wise beings consider whether their assumptions might be incomplete." He began walking again, leading her toward a section of the observation deck that offered a panoramic view of the station's exterior. The sight was breathtaking, thousands of ships moving in carefully orchestrated patterns, massive cargo transfers in progress, the intricate dance of galactic commerce on display. "The Council has maintained order in this galaxy for over 20,000 years," Mirthak said.
That order depends on each species understanding and accepting their proper role.
But order imposed through incomplete understanding is fragile. Sarah felt the weight of his words.
What exactly are you saying, Consul?
Mirthak was quiet for a long time, watching the ships move through space below them. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I am saying that some debts are more complicated than they appear on first examination. I am saying that creditors sometimes discover that their debtors remember transactions differently than expected. And I am saying that when such discoveries occur, it is sometimes wise to reconsider the terms of outstanding obligations.
Before Sarah could respond, Mirthak turned and walked away, leaving her alone on the observation deck.
The message was clear enough. He suspected that humanity's true capabilities were far greater than the Council understood, and he was suggesting that a renegotiation of their relationship might be preferable to a direct confrontation. Sarah remained on the observation deck for another hour, watching the ships and considering the implications of everything she had learned. The Debt Codex had revealed that humanity's entire history with galactic civilization was based on lies and manipulation. Mirthak's warnings suggested that the Council was beginning to realize humanity might not be as controlled as they had believed. Most concerning of all, the disappearing Council ships suggested that someone, presumably humanity, was already taking action based on this knowledge. As she finally made her way back to her quarters, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented. For 3,000 years, humanity had been held in check by psychological conditioning and technological limitations. But if those controls were failing, and if humanity really did possess capabilities the Council had never suspected, then the entire galactic order was about to change. The question was whether the change would come through negotiation or conflict. Based on what she had learned about humanity's true history, Sarah suspected the answer would depend on just how thoroughly the species had been deceived about their own capabilities. The debt was indeed coming due, but it appeared that the creditors were about to discover that their accounting methods had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. The first payment came exactly 72 hours after Sarah's final conversation with Consul Mirthak. She was reviewing routine trade agreements in her office when the emergency alert chimed through her communication system. All diplomatic personnel to secure stations, came the announcement in multiple languages. Priority Council session initiating immediately. Sarah secured her files and made her way to the Council chambers, where she found the usual ordered calm replaced by barely controlled chaos. Representatives from dozens of species clustered in agitated groups, their translator devices creating a cacophony of concerned voices in hundreds of languages. Archon Vexthera emerged from the central chambers, her serpentine form moving with unusual urgency. The normal grace and authority of her bearing seemed diminished, replaced by something that looked remarkably like fear. Representatives will take their designated positions, Vexthera announced, her voice carrying clearly over the noise. Emergency session protocols are now in effect. Sarah moved to the human section, noting that several other species representatives were studying her with expressions ranging from suspicion to outright hostility. Whatever had prompted this emergency session, humanity was clearly connected to it. The Council has received disturbing reports from the Kepler sectors, Vexthera began without preamble. 3 hours ago, the Zephyrian Third Fleet, conducting routine patrol operations in that region, encountered an unknown human vessel in the restricted Kepler 442 system. Sarah's blood chilled. Kepler 442 was one of the systems her exploration teams had been investigating despite its restricted status. If a Council fleet had encountered a human ship there, the diplomatic implications were severe. The human vessel was operating sophisticated scanning equipment in direct violation of Treaty 16, Section 7, Vexthera continued. When challenged by Fleet Commander Zethkar, the human vessel transmitted a single message, payment schedule attached. Kepler 442 system transferred to Human Administrative Authority as per Debt Codex provisions, Article 2847. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the assembled representatives. Sarah felt her heart racing as the implications became clear. Someone was using the information from the Debt Codex to challenge Council authority directly. The human vessel then proceeded to disable the Third Fleet's primary systems using technological capabilities that should not exist in human space, Vexthera announced. All 17 ships of the fleet were left powerless but undamaged. The human vessel departed with a final transmission, receipt of payment acknowledged. Next installment due in 72 hours. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Representatives demanded explanations, accusations, and immediate action. Through the chaos, Sarah heard the Thraxian delegate's voice rise above the others. The humans have committed an act of war against the Council. Their vessel attacked a legitimate patrol fleet. The fleet was not attacked, Vexthera corrected, though her tone suggested she found the distinction insignificant. Their systems were temporarily disabled through unknown means. No personnel were harmed, and all equipment was restored to functionality within 6 hours. Consul Mirthak rose from his position, his aged form commanding immediate attention. Archon, you referenced a payment schedule and debt codex provisions. What exactly did this schedule contain? Vexthera's hesitation was barely perceptible, but Sarah caught it. The transmission contained a comprehensive analysis of historical interactions between the Council and human space, along with detailed calculations of compensation owed for various services rendered. Services rendered? Mirthak's tone was carefully neutral, but Sarah detected an undercurrent of something else. What manner of services? The document claims that several Council interventions in human affairs were unauthorized and require restitution. Vexthera's voice carried a note of incredulity. It demands compensation for what it terms illegal biological warfare during the Plague Years, unauthorized technological sabotage, and systematic violations of species sovereignty. The chamber fell silent. Sarah realized she was holding her breath as the full scope of what was happening became clear. Someone had taken the information from the debt codex and turned it into a bill for payment. The calculations are extensive, Vexthera continued. According to this document, the Council owes human space territorial control of 47 star systems, technological restitution in the form of unrestricted faster-than-light drives, and what it terms war reparations for 3 millennia of illegal subjugation. The Thraxian delegate's mandibles clicked frantically. This is preposterous. The humans owe everything to Council generosity. Their entire civilization exists at our sufferance. That, said a new voice, appears to be the source of the disagreement. Every head in the chamber turned toward the speaker. A human man Sarah didn't recognize had entered the chamber and was walking calmly toward the central speaking area. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and the kind of quiet confidence that came from absolute certainty of purpose. I am Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Defense Consortium, he announced. I am here to discuss the payment schedule and arrange for orderly transfer of the first installments. Security forces throughout the chamber reached for weapons, but Vexthera raised a restraining gesture. Admiral Webb, your presence here is highly irregular. Human diplomatic protocol requires, the Human Defense Consortium is not bound by previous diplomatic protocols, Webb interrupted smoothly. Those agreements were negotiated under false pretenses and are therefore void. We are here to discuss new arrangements based on accurate historical accounting. Sarah stared at the man in shock. The Human Defense Consortium was supposedly a minor colonial militia organization. The idea that they would send someone to challenge the Galactic Council directly was inconceivable. You speak of accurate historical accounting, Mirthak said carefully. Upon what do you base your calculations? Webb smiled, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. There was something predatory in that expression, something that suggested the mild-mannered man standing before them was far more dangerous than he appeared. We base our calculations on the complete Council archives, Consul. All of them. Not just the sanitized version provided to the debt codex, but the classified records that detail the true nature of the pacification protocol. The blood drained from Vexthera's face, her scales shifting from their usual golden hue to a pale silver that Sarah had never seen before. You have no access to classified Council archives, Vexthera said, but her voice lacked conviction. Don't we? Webb activated a holographic projector that filled the chamber with detailed schematics and classified documents. Operation Silent Chains, authorized 2,847 years ago. Biological warfare protocols designed to reduce human population by 80%. Technological sabotage programs to prevent human development of independent faster-than-light capability. Psychological conditioning protocols to ensure permanent compliance with Council authority. The documents rotated slowly in the air, their classifications and authorization codes clearly visible to everyone in the chamber. Sarah recognized some of them from the debt codex, but many were marked with security levels far beyond what she had been permitted to access. Where did you obtain these documents? Vexthera demanded. Webb's smile widened. The same place we obtained the technological specifications for your security systems, your fleet deployment schedules, and your contingency plans for dealing with rebellious client species. It turns out that when you systematically underestimate someone for 3,000 years, they develop quite a talent for exceeding your expectations. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted demands for explanations while security forces struggled to determine appropriate responses to an unprecedented situation. Through it all, Webb stood calmly in the center of the storm, waiting for the noise to die down.
The payment schedule is quite straightforward, Webb continued once relative quiet returned.
Immediate territorial transfer of the 47 systems detailed in Section 1, delivery of unrestricted faster-than-light drive technology to human space within 30 days, and formal acknowledgement of human sovereignty over all previously claimed territories.
This is madness, the Thraxian delegate protested. The Council will never agree to such demands.
Oh, but you will,
Webb replied. Because the alternative is discovering just how thoroughly we've been preparing for this conversation. The disabled fleet in the Kepler sector was a demonstration of our restraint, not our capability.
We prefer negotiation to other forms of debt collection.
Vexthera had regained some of her composure, though her scales remained pale. You are threatening the Galactic Council?
I am offering to settle a legitimate debt through peaceful means, Webb corrected. The alternative is allowing the debt to accumulate additional interest charges. Our calculations show that the current balance is quite manageable compared to what it will become if payments are delayed.
And if the Council refuses your settlement offer? Mirthak asked.
Webb's expression didn't change, but something in the air seemed to shift. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. Then, we will be forced to pursue more aggressive collection methods.
The next demonstration will be considerably less restrained than disabling a patrol fleet.
We have extensive records of Council military capabilities, strategic deployments, and defensive protocols. We've had 3,000 years to study your methods and develop appropriate responses. The threat was delivered in the same calm tone Webb had used throughout the conversation, but its implications sent ripples of fear through the assembled representatives. Sarah realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, a client species not just rebelling against Council authority, but demonstrating the capability to enforce their demands. You cannot possibly match Council military capabilities, Vexthera said, but uncertainty crept into her voice.
Can't we?
Webb gestured toward the holographic displays, which shifted to show detailed analyses of Council fleet compositions and tactical doctrines. Your assumptions about human capabilities were based on data that is 3,000 years out of date. During that time, while you believed we were grateful clients contributing to galactic stability, we were actually studying every aspect of Council operations. The displays showed infiltration of Council facilities, detailed intelligence on military capabilities, and comprehensive analyses of strategic weaknesses that Sarah couldn't believe existed.
The scope of the intelligence operation was staggering.
Every ship you've built, every weapon system you've deployed, every strategic doctrine you've developed, we've been watching and learning. We know where your fleets are deployed, what your response times are, and exactly how to neutralize your capabilities with minimal collateral damage. Webb paused to let this information sink in before continuing. We also know that several other client species have become dissatisfied with their current arrangements. It would be unfortunate if they were to receive copies of their respective debt calculations and payment schedules.
The Altarians alone have quite an impressive claim for technological restitution.
Mirthak's cybernetic implants flickered, and Sarah realized he was processing this information at superhuman speeds.
You are suggesting a galaxy-wide rebellion against Council authority.
I am suggesting that accurate accounting reveals the Council owes substantial compensation to numerous species for unauthorized interventions over the millennia, Webb replied. Whether this leads to rebellion depends entirely on the Council's willingness to honor their obligations.
The chamber fell silent as the representatives absorbed the magnitude of what they were hearing.
Sarah found herself caught between terror and admiration for the audacity of Webb's proposal. Humanity was essentially presenting the Galactic Council with an ultimatum backed by capabilities that shouldn't exist.
72 hours, Webb announced, deactivating his holographic displays. The next payment is due then.
I suggest you use the time wisely to consider our settlement offer. The terms will become considerably less favorable if we are forced to pursue alternative collection methods. He turned to leave, then paused and looked directly at Sarah.
Ambassador Chen, your services will no longer be required. The Human Defense Consortium will be handling all future diplomatic relations with the Council.
As Webb departed, Sarah realized that everything she had known about humanity's place in the galaxy had been completely wrong. The debt was indeed coming due, but the creditors were about to discover that their debtors had been keeping much more accurate books than anyone had suspected. The Council's response came 68 hours later in the form of the largest military mobilization in galactic history. 7 battle fleets, comprising over 3,000 vessels from a dozen species, converged on the edges of human space with the clear intention of reminding humanity of their proper place in the cosmic order. Sarah watched the deployment from her office on Nexus Prime, monitoring communications traffic and fleet movements through her diplomatic access systems. The scale of the response was overwhelming. The Council was committing nearly half their total military capability to what they still believed was a minor colonial uprising. They don't understand, she murmured to herself as she tracked the massive formations moving through jump space toward human territories. They still think this is about suppressing a rebellion. Her communication system chimed with an incoming priority message from Admiral Webb. Sarah had been expecting this contact since her diplomatic credentials had been officially revoked by the Human Defense Consortium 6 hours after Webb's departure from the Council chambers.
Ambassador Chen, Webb's voice carried clearly through the quantum relay. I hope you've been monitoring Council fleet movements. Admiral, what you're proposing is going to result in a galactic war. The Council has committed nearly 3,000 ships to the response force. Humanity can't possibly what? Webb interrupted. Match their numbers? Survive their assault? Win a direct confrontation? Ambassador, you're still thinking in terms of the limitations they imposed on us.
Let me show you what humanity actually looks like when those limitations are removed. Sarah's display screen flickered and, then, filled with tactical data that made her jaw drop. The information showed human fleet compositions, ship classifications, and deployment patterns that bore no resemblance to anything in the official records. Where Council intelligence estimated humanity possessed perhaps 200 ships suitable for system defense, the data showed over 15,000 vessels ranging from advanced scouts to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in Council fleets. The technological specifications were even more shocking: ships capable of faster-than-light speeds that exceeded Council capabilities by orders of magnitude, weapon systems based on principles that shouldn't have been discovered for centuries, and defensive technologies that seemed almost magical in their sophistication.
How is this possible? Sarah whispered. 3,000 years of preparation, Webb replied.
While the Council believed their pacification protocol had crippled our development, we were actually using their psychological conditioning as cover for the largest military buildup in galactic history. Every mining colony was actually a shipyard. Every exploration team was conducting strategic reconnaissance.
Every grateful human was gathering intelligence on Council capabilities. The scope of the deception was staggering. Sarah tried to process the implications of what she was seeing.
The disappearing Council ships in the Kepler sectors, field tests of our capture and analysis protocols, Webb confirmed. We needed to verify that our intelligence on Council military technology was current. The ships and crews are unharmed, by the way.
We're not monsters. They're currently guests at one of our research facilities, contributing valuable data to our understanding of galactic military doctrine.
Sarah felt a chill as she realized the true scope of what was happening.
You've been planning this for centuries. Millennia, Webb corrected.
The first generation of humans who learned the truth about the pacification protocol made a collective decision. They chose to appear grateful and compliant while secretly preparing for the day when humanity would be strong enough to collect what was owed.
Every generation since has contributed to that preparation.
The communication display shifted to show historical documentation, secret records of the Human Defense Consortium dating back over 2,000 years. Generation after generation of humans had lived double lives, maintaining the facade of grateful client species while building the infrastructure for eventual rebellion.
Why now? Sarah asked.
Why reveal yourselves today?
Because the Council's control is failing, Webb replied.
The psychological conditioning they used to keep us compliant has broken down over time.
More importantly, they're beginning to suspect that something isn't right.
Consul Mirthak's investigation into our activities was just the beginning. Within a decade, they would have discovered the truth anyway. We preferred to control the timing of the revelation.
Sarah watched the tactical displays showing Council fleets approaching human space. What happens when they arrive?
They receive a demonstration of what humanity has become during our centuries of grateful service, Webb said.
The first payment was territorial transfer. The second payment is technological demonstration. The third payment will be considerably more expensive for the Council.
Before Sarah could respond, her display screen shifted to show real-time feeds from the edge of human space. The Council's first battle group, led by the massive dreadnought Eternal Dominion, dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol System, humanity's original home. Admiral Cathran, commanding from the Eternal Dominion's bridge, transmitted the standard demand for immediate surrender. His message was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every human vessel in the system would receive it clearly.
Rebellious human forces, this is Admiral Cathran of the Galactic Council First Battle Group.
By authority of the Council, you are ordered to cease all illegal activities and surrender immediately. Your unprovoked attacks on Council vessels constitute acts of war that will be met with appropriate force.
You have 1 hour to comply.
The response came 30 seconds later from a single human ship that appeared seemingly from nowhere in the middle of the Council formation. The vessel was unlike anything in Council intelligence files, sleek, angular, and radiating energy signatures that their sensors couldn't properly analyze.
Admiral Cathran, this is Captain Sarah Martinez of the HSC Retribution. We are here to deliver the second payment on humanity's outstanding account. Please prepare to receive our settlement offer.
Before the Council ships could react, the Retribution activated systems that defied every understanding of physics the Council possessed. Space itself seemed to bend around the human vessel as it simultaneously appeared at multiple points throughout the Council formation. The demonstration that followed was precise, overwhelming, and absolutely terrifying.
Every Council ship in the battle group found their primary systems offline within seconds.
Weapons, shields, propulsion, and communication arrays all failed simultaneously, leaving 300 of the galaxy's most advanced warships floating helplessly in space. The failure wasn't the result of weapons fire or visible attack, the systems simply stopped functioning as if they had forgotten how to operate. Your vessels are undamaged but disabled, Captain Martinez announced over the general communication channel.
This demonstration illustrates humanity's current defensive capabilities.
Your ships will be restored to functionality in 6 hours.
Please use this time to reconsider the terms of our settlement offer.
The Retribution vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving the Council fleet drifting in space with no functional systems and no understanding of what had happened to them.
Sarah watched the feeds in stunned silence.
The Council's most powerful battle group had been neutralized without a single shot being fired.
The technological superiority displayed by the human vessel was absolute and undeniable. How, she whispered. Quantum field manipulation, Webb explained, though his words meant little to Sarah.
We've learned to interact directly with the fundamental forces that govern matter and energy. Council weapons and defenses are based on crude applications of these same forces. It's like bringing guns to a sword fight, except we're the ones with the guns.
More tactical displays appeared on Sarah's screen, showing the other Council battle groups arriving at the edges of human space only to encounter similar demonstrations.
In every case, the pattern was identical. A single human vessel would appear, disable entire fleets within seconds, then depart after delivering a message about settlement payments.
The Council is going to escalate, Sarah warned. Admiral Cathran isn't going to accept this humiliation. They'll bring in everything they have.
Yes, Webb agreed. Which brings us to the third payment. The Council has approximately 24 hours to accept our settlement offer before we're forced to pursue more aggressive collection methods.
What does that mean?
Webb was quiet for a moment before responding.
It means that tomorrow, the galaxy will learn what humanity looks like when we stop pretending to be grateful.
The communication ended, leaving Sarah alone with the tactical displays showing disabled Council fleets scattered throughout human space. She tried to process the magnitude of what she had witnessed, but the implications were too vast to fully comprehend. Humanity had spent 3,000 years convincing the galaxy that they were weak, grateful, and harmless. In reality, they had been preparing for a war that would reshape the entire cosmic order. The technology they had developed during their apparent subjugation was so far beyond galactic standards that Council fleets might as well have been attacking with stone weapons. But what frightened Sarah most was the realization that the demonstrations so far had been carefully restrained. The human ships had disabled Council vessels without causing casualties, delivered their messages without threats of violence, and departed without pursuing their advantages. It was the behavior of someone who possessed overwhelming superiority and wanted to minimize unnecessary destruction. Tomorrow, if the council refused the settlement offer, Sarah suspected she would witness what happened when humanity stopped exercising restraint. She activated her personal communication system and began composing a message to her contacts within the council hierarchy. Someone needed to understand that this wasn't a rebellion to be crushed, it was a debt collection by a creditor who possessed the power to enforce their demands. The question was whether anyone would listen before it was too late to avoid learning what 3,000 years of human preparation had actually produced. Outside her office window, the lights of Nexus Prime continued their eternal dance, but Sarah could see increased security activity and emergency response teams moving through the station's corridors. Word of the fleet defeats was spreading, and panic was beginning to set in among the galactic leadership. The debt was coming due, and payment time was almost over. The Council's refusal came at exactly the 24-hour mark, delivered by Archon Vexthera in a galaxy-wide broadcast that was transmitted to every inhabited system under Council authority. The Galactic Council does not negotiate with terrorists or rebellious client species, Vexthera announced, her serpentine form coiled around the central podium in the Council chambers. The recent attacks on Council vessels constitute acts of war that will be met with the full force of galactic law. The human species will be brought to heel and their leaders will face justice for their crimes against cosmic order. Sarah watched the broadcast from her office on Nexus Prime, her heart sinking as she realized the Council leadership had fundamentally misunderstood the situation they were facing. They still believed they were dealing with an uprising that could be crushed through superior force rather than a debt collection by a creditor who possessed overwhelming technological superiority. The response came 18 minutes later. Every screen, every communication device, every holographic projector in Council space simultaneously activated to display the same message. The source signal bypassed all security protocols and defensive systems as if they didn't exist. Admiral Webb appeared in perfect high-resolution detail, standing in what appeared to be the command center of a vessel beyond anything Sarah had ever imagined. The background showed walls of flowing energy and controls that seemed to respond to pure thought rather than physical manipulation. Members of the Galactic Council, Webb began, his voice carrying clearly across the galaxy. You have chosen to default on your obligations. As per standard debt collection protocols, we are hereby implementing immediate asset seizure to cover outstanding balances. The display shifted to show a tactical overview of the galaxy that took Sarah's breath away. The map revealed the true scope of human expansion during their supposed subjugation. Where Council records showed humanity confined to a few dozen marginal systems, the reality was a vast network of hidden colonies, research facilities, and military installations that span nearly half the galaxy. Human space has grown considerably during our period of grateful service, Webb continued. We have been quietly establishing ourselves in systems the Council considered worthless or inaccessible. Our current territorial holdings exceed Council space by approximately 300%. The implications were staggering. While the Council had believed they were managing a small client species, humanity had been building a shadow empire that dwarfed galactic civilization. However, Webb said, territorial expansion was merely preparation for today's activities. Asset seizure will begin with strategic targets. Sarah's blood ran cold as the display highlighted every major Council military installation in the galaxy. Space stations, shipyards, weapons research facilities, and command centers were marked with targeting indicators that suggested humanity possessed detailed intelligence on every significant military asset the Council possessed. The seizures began immediately. Reports flooded into the Council chambers as installations across the galaxy simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished. Massive space stations, orbital shipyards, and entire fleet bases disappeared without trace as if they had never existed. The personnel inside reported finding themselves safely relocated to nearby planets with no memory of how the transfer had occurred. Primary asset seizure complete, Webb announced as the reports continued to arrive. All major Council military installations have been relocated to secure storage pending final settlement negotiations. Personnel have been safely evacuated and will be returned upon resolution of outstanding obligations. Sarah stared at the incoming reports in disbelief. Humanity had somehow managed to literally steal entire space stations and military facilities without harming anyone inside them. The technology required for such operations was beyond anything she could imagine. Secondary asset seizure will now commence, Webb continued. This time, the targets were economic rather than military. major trade stations, resource processing facilities, and commercial hubs throughout Council space began disappearing with the same impossible precision. Within hours, the economic infrastructure that kept galactic civilization functioning had been systematically removed and relocated to unknown locations. The panic that swept through Council space was immediate and complete. Without their military installations and economic centers, the vast administrative apparatus that governed hundreds of species began to collapse. Communication networks failed as relay stations vanished. Transportation systems broke down as navigation beacons disappeared. The careful order that had maintained galactic stability for millennia crumbled in a matter of hours.
Tertiary asset seizure targeting governmental infrastructure, Webb announced.
The council chambers themselves shuddered as some impossibly powerful force began to affect the very structure of Nexus Prime. Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the air itself was becoming charged with energy. Through her office window, she could see the station's outer sections beginning to shimmer and fade.
All council personnel will be safely relocated to designated temporary facilities, Webb's voice echoed through the dissolving corridors. Normal governmental functions will resume once outstanding debts have been resolved. Sarah found herself standing in a comfortable room that definitely wasn't her office on Nexus Prime.
The walls were a soft blue color and the furnishings appeared to be designed specifically for human comfort. Through a large window, she could see rolling hills and forests that looked remarkably like Earth's countryside. A gentle chime drew her attention to a communication panel that had materialized on the nearby wall.
Admiral Webb's image appeared when she activated it. Ambassador Chen, I apologize for the abrupt relocation, Webb said.
You and approximately 2 million other council personnel have been moved to temporary accommodations while we complete asset seizure operations. The facilities are quite comfortable and you'll find everything you need for an extended stay.
Admiral, what have you done? Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. We have seized sufficient assets to cover humanity's outstanding debt, Webb replied.
Every major military installation, economic center, and governmental facility in council space is now under human control. The council can have them back when they agree to honor their obligations.
Sarah moved to the window and stared out at the peaceful landscape. Where are we?
You're in the Kepler 442 system, on a planet we've been preparing for exactly this purpose. The climate is pleasant, the facilities are comfortable, and you'll be well cared for while negotiations proceed.
Think of it as a very large conference center for debt settlement discussions.
The audacity of what humanity had accomplished was breathtaking. They had essentially kidnapped the entire galactic government along with their military and economic infrastructure, all while ensuring that no one was harmed in the process.
How is this possible?
Sarah whispered. Webb smiled with what might have been genuine warmth.
3,000 years of preparation, Ambassador.
While the Council believed they were managing a grateful client species, we were developing technologies that make their capabilities look primitive. We've learned to manipulate space, time, matter, and energy in ways they never imagined possible.
The psychological conditioning was real, but imperfect, Webb confirmed.
It took several generations for us to understand what had been done to us and begin developing countermeasures.
Once we broke free from their mental control, we realized that the Council's greatest weakness was their absolute certainty that they understood our capabilities. Sarah was beginning to grasp the true scope of humanity's achievement. You've been planning this entire operation for centuries. Millennia, Webb corrected.
Every human who contributed to this effort knew they would never see the final result.
They worked and sacrificed so that their descendants would one day be free. Today is the culmination of the longest-term project in human history.
The communication display shifted to show images of the relocated council installations. The massive space stations and military facilities hung in space around various human-controlled systems, completely intact but clearly under new management. Human ships moved between them in organized patterns that suggested the transition of control was proceeding smoothly.
What happens now? Sarah asked.
Now the council leadership decides whether they want to negotiate a reasonable settlement or whether they prefer to discover what happens when humanity stops being quite so restrained in our collection methods, Webb replied. You're holding the entire galactic government hostage. We're conducting debt settlement negotiations with appropriate leverage, Webb corrected. The council owes humanity compensation for 3 millennia of illegal subjugation. We're simply ensuring they have sufficient incentive to honor their obligations. Sarah realized she was witnessing the birth of a new galactic order. Humanity had not only freed itself from Council control but had demonstrated the capability to impose their will on the entire galaxy if necessary. The species that had been dismissed as grateful pets had revealed themselves to be apex predators who had been patiently preparing for this moment across thousands of years.
The settlement terms remain the same, Webb continued.
Territorial recognition of human sovereignty, technological restitution for sabotage development, and formal acknowledgement of the illegal nature of the pacification protocol.
In exchange, we'll return their assets and provide guarantees of non-interference in their internal affairs. And if they refuse? Webb's expression grew serious. Then, they'll discover that asset seizure was our most gentle collection method. Humanity has developed capabilities during our period of servitude that would terrify civilizations far more advanced than the Council. We prefer negotiation, but we are prepared for any outcome. Through the window of her temporary accommodations, Sarah could see other relocated personnel moving through the peaceful landscape. Representatives from dozens of species were scattered across the area, all of them trying to process the magnitude of what had occurred. The debt had indeed come due, and humanity had collected it with interest. The galaxy would never be the same. As the communication ended and Sarah settled into her temporary quarters, she found herself wondering what kind of galaxy would emerge from these negotiations. Humanity had demonstrated overwhelming superiority in every aspect of civilization, technology, strategy, organization, and sheer patience. They had outplayed opponents who never realized they were playing a game. But, perhaps most impressively, they had accomplished all of this while maintaining their fundamental humanity. The relocations had been carried out with care for the safety and comfort of everyone involved. The asset seizures had been precise and non-destructive. Even in their moment of ultimate triumph, humans were choosing restraint over revenge. Outside her window, the artificial sun of Kepler 442 began to set over the rolling hills where the future of galactic civilization would be decided. Sarah suspected that when the negotiations were complete, the galaxy would discover that being ruled by humans was considerably more pleasant than anyone had dared to hope. The debt was paid in full, and the galaxy belonged to humanity now.